Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matthew Budney, and in preparation for the upcoming Freeblades North American Championship, a few players have had questions about breaking up fights and separating combats into smaller groups, per the rules on page 62. Therefore, I am using Tabletop Simulator, using on one side the Ravenblade, on the other side the Demons, to demonstrate how to do so with a couple of multiple setups and scenarios. For example, here in this first scenario, you have the Azalakar, the Demon Leader, Discipline D12, facing off against two Ravenblade Soldiers, Discipline D10, and two Militia Spearmen in Support Contact, Discipline D6. This is a valid combat, right here, as it states. It follows every single rule on page 62. The Ravenblade can only attack the Demon, either Ravenblade. The Support Contacted, or the Spearman in Support Contact can only attack the Demon, and just because the Demon has two models, he's not going to break off from one fight to attack the other. This is a valid combat. Doesn't matter how they got here. They could have all charged. They could have all this is just the end result after a turn because nobody dealt any wounds. Now you're asking, well, why you got the Militia Spearman in Support Contact? If the Militia Spearmen, in this case, were over here, would that change anything? The answer is no, although it does allow the Azalakar, who does not have to obey Hero's Honor, to attack a Spearman versus a Ravenblade Soldier, so it does make it a little easier for the Demons. So that's why I put the Spearman in back. Now, let's take a look at this other, a bit more complicated situation. Again, you're going to have the Azalakar. He's got a Ravenblade with the Militia Spearman, who both charged in. And then in this case, we've got a Mizraki and a Spearman who also charge in the Azalakar. For this instance, we could just say the Demon was held up and blade danced away. Couldn't do anything to avoid it. Couldn't get his charge off. Whatever. But we also have a Seriad, Discipline D10, going up against this Ravenblade, and then we have this Skrot going up against this Militia Spearman. Whether they charge or not doesn't matter. So how does this combat break up? Well, as the rules say, start with any models that only have one possible opponent. In this case, the Skrot attacks the Spearman. So these do separate slightly. Now, the Militia Spearman only turns around if he did not exceed his speed. If he did, the Skrot gets a free attack in the back of the Spearman. And don't forget, attacks in the back ignore shields. That's front arc only. Now, we're going to look over here and get a little more complicated. Okay? Let's move this out of the way because that fight's done. This fight's been resolved. I'm just moving it out further just so we can go do a little bit more. The Mizraki, only possible target is the Azalakar. There we go. That's taken care of nice and easy. The Seriad, only possible target is the Ravenblade. The Spearman is in support contact of the Ravenblade, so the Seriad will pull both attacks off. Now, the Ravenblade and the Spearman still charged, so they will still get the charge bonus against the Seriad. It just helps save the Azalakar from all the attacks. And that is how you would separate this combat. Now, the reason why the Azalakar goes over to the Mizraki, because the Mizraki's only valid target is the Azalakar. Okay? And having the third wheel, this is what they're trying to avoid. Okay? You get the Mizraki and the Ravenblade attacking the Azalakar, while the Seriad, it just gets nasty. So that's why John, when they did the rules this way. That is how you break up this fight. Now, we get to this one. I've actually seen this happen in game once, where you have 4 models where each model touches every other model. I've seen this happen once, not so much during a charge or anything like that, but as a reposition after a fight is resolved. One side fled, you had a 3-inch reposition. I've seen this happen, okay? Now, in situations like this, we have a Seriad, D10 Discipline, Mizraki, D10 Discipline, another Seriad, D10 Discipline, Ravenblade Soldier, D10 Discipline. How does this fight break up? First things first. Again, on page 62, we're going to follow the criteria. Charging models. In this instance, neither side charged. Now remember, players get to choose. So if in this case, if the Seriad charged, the player who controlled the Seriad would get to choose whether the Seriad's going against the Mizraki or the Ravenblade. Okay. Same thing if the Ravenblade charged, you get to choose which Seriad to go against. Okay, which does kind of matter. If neither side charged, we go to step 2, highest discipline. In this case, they all have discipline D10. So that doesn't break it. So finally, the absolute tiebreaker is first player. Now, in this case, even though I've got the Seriad, both Seriads here, a Mizraki and a Ravenblade, does it really matter, which way goes which? As it sits right now, no. One Seriad would pair off with the Ravenblade, the other Seriad would pair off with the Mizraki. But what if this was a campaign and one Seriad had an advancement or two? What if it had Bone Crusher? It's a demon. It's absolutely possible. It's one of the demon, opportunities with the D16 roll instead of a magic item. What if, one of the Ravenblade or the Mizraki, what if they were wounded, had a wound on them? There's a whole bunch of reasons why breaking off, even though like this, as I say, it may seem simple, but it may not be. What if you've got a wounded Mizraki and a wounded Seriad, but you don't want these two to fight? You want your healthy Seriad there and the unhealthy to fight the Ravenblade for whatever reason. Or if their Mar was different. Just, campaigns do change a lot of the talents and abilities. That's where you've got to look a little deeper and go, well, okay, for a normal tournament, this is what you would do, and it's a no-brainer. But let's take it a slightly step further. And you have a Scrot. Same scenario. Again, no charging models. Then we go to highest discipline. Well, in this case, tie, tie, tie. No one has a higher discipline. It's not like having the Azalakar or the Lieutenant over here with their higher discipline, which would allow them to choose. But in this case, we would have to go to first player, which would determine who attacks what. In this case, there's a bigger choice at play. If the Mizraki's wounded, you'd rather have, the Ravenblade player would rather have the Scrot fight the Mizraki than, say, the Seriad, Or if the Seriad was wounded, the demon player may have brought the Scrot in, and it doesn't matter who the Scrot attacked, just so it pulled off the Seriad, the second model against the Seriad. So even though these 4 paragraphs in the rules look complicated, they're really not. One other thing, one final note, is when you do have a combat, and if it does get broken up for whatever reason, we'll go back to the Seriad here pulling off. These now absolutely become different fights. So even though they're, real close together area-wise, the Seriad fighting the Ravenblade and the Militia Spearman is its own separate, complete, self-contained fight. And then the Azalakar fighting a Ravenblade Militia Spearman, in this case, is its own self-contained fight. And they can't help each other. The Seriad can't throw at this Ravenblade, for example. In this case. Couldn't have done, So, anyway, hope this helps clear up a few questions that players have had. Thank you for